At some point, this movie stops being what you've been watching and turns into something completely different. So does this one. Both directed by Stanley Kubrick, they use a storytelling trick I like to call the switch. Spoilers. Full Metal Jacket's most infamous scene is actually where the switch occurs. In the first half, we see the mental and physical toll war takes on the boys, and we haven't even gone to war yet. One of the privates the sergeant calls Pyle has enough of the abuse and goes insane. The story can no longer continue as it once was. We must transition to a new status quo, which Full Metal Jacket deliberately does quickly. They could have stayed and uncovered the aftermath at boot camp, but instead we moved on to Vietnam, the second movie in Full Metal Jacket. There isn't a single mention of boot camp, but if we can infer that earlier experience was universal for every Marine, then only imagine how many other Private Pyles were out there. These two halves don't work separately, they must complement each other. The second half is very anticlimactic, just like the actual Vietnam War. The final moments of this movie are used to hunt down a single sniper, and it happens to be some Vietnamese teenager with an AK for some reason. I explain all of this to say without the second half, the being anticlimactic on purpose thing doesn't work if we don't see how much these men went through in the first half to fight in the war. The first half is much better as a standalone piece, but still needs the second half to explore the anti-war message deeper. These two halves successfully mesh together thanks to Private Pyle acting as our warning character. A warning character is a foreshadowing tool that shows potential outcomes that our main character must avoid. Best example is Brooks, the old man with the bird in Shawshank Redemption. He foreshadows Ellis's eventual life after parole and acts as a warning. Pyle is used in a similar way, only on a larger scale once our Marines' numbers slowly dwindle, and we see how meaningless this war and the preparation these Marines went through truly was. Okay, enough about Full Metal Jacket. Let's talk about another movie. A Clockwork Orange has the same exact structure of two movies in one, only exploring different themes around the gap between good and evil, justice and free will. The first half is purposefully grotesque and unsettling because the second half is pure suffering. For us to be on board with the suffering Alex, the gang leader, will soon go through, we must first hate him. And what better way than to leave us in the room while these criminals are in the act? Once Alex gets locked up, our status quo of crime, sex, and listening to Beethoven is taken away and literally used against him as a form of punishment in the second half thanks to a radical new treatment. The switch isn't as clear as Full Metal Jacket, but equally as interesting. And just like the previous movie, both halves are complementary pieces. Without the first half, we don't hate Alex, and because the treatment and the things that follow are quite cruel, we might have empathy where it's clearly not deserved. Without the second half, there is a moral imbalance. In this story specifically, it is essential to show both the crime and the punishment to fully explore the ideas I mentioned before. The story relies on the switch technique to maintain the balance between immoral acts and immoral punishments. This culminates into one of the greatest endings ever, where Alex is no longer affected by the treatment and turned into a political weapon by even worse people than him.
I was cured, all right.
The switch is one of the trickiest storytelling devices due to the whole story revolving around it. Only use if your story requires it, because you must respect the balance. And hey, don't worry about if the greatest director of all time already did it perfectly twice. If you can do it too, that's 2 movies for the price of 1, which is great value.
Shut up and take my money!